All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm really excited for this one. Thank you for joining us online as well. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Clayn Lambert, who's Department Chair and Clinical Associate Professor at ISU's College of Technology, where he spent 24 years building learning systems that meet skeptical, performance-driven professionals where they are. His work centers on scalable instructional design frameworks that enable rigid educational systems to adapt without breaking, competency-based curriculum, AI-enhanced learning models, and just-in-time training that connects directly to workplace performance. He earned the Cole McGuffey Award for Outstanding Research in 2019 for establishing that effective instruction for developmental learners requires meeting students where they are, not where curriculum says they should be. A finding that shaped his dissertation work and continues to drive the STACK framework. His current research explores how AI-enabled scaffolding makes individualized instruction scalable, allowing educators to teach to the edges rather than the comfortable middle. So thank you. And I'll turn the floor over to you, Clay.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody coming today. I apologize. We got moving a little bit slowly, but I think we're good to go. And so what we're going to be talking about today is something that I've kind of developed over, like Doug was saying, about the last 24 years, called STACK. And to begin with, I want to go back in time to 1952. The Air Force has run into a problem. They have incredible technology. Their jets are far and away the best jets in the air. They have an incredible training program for pilots. And these pilots are going through these training programs and are showing high levels of proficiency in everything that they're being taught. But when they are actually assigned to their operational squadrons and they're out on the flight line, we see an incredible drop in performance. Mistakes are being made, accidents are happening, and there is a clear gap between the performance in training and the performance out in the air. And they can't figure out what's going on. So the Air Force begins by saying it must be a problem with the pilots. We got to get better pilots. So they try to increase their standards, no change. Then they say, well, it must be the instructors. So they fire all of their training instructors, hire new people, no change. And they are completely stymied as to why they're having such a gap between training and actual performance. So they hire a scientist named Gilbert Daniels. And Gilbert Daniels, instead of going down the same routes that everybody else went through, does something completely different. He says, let's look at what's going on. And one of the things that he discovered is that airplane manufacturers, when they designed these planes, said that what we're going to do is we are going to find the average pilot. And we're going to measure what an average pilot looks like, and we're going to assume that most everybody fits into that average plus or minus 30%. And that's how we design our cockpits. So Gilbert went and interviewed 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 different physical attributes. The chest dimensions, height, leg length, arm length, all of these different kinds of things. And as he measured all of these, his hypothesis was how many pilots were average across all 10 dimensions. His hypothesis, because we're talking about an average, is most of them should fit into this. His actual finding, now bear in mind, this is over 4,000 pilots. Guess how many people actually measured as average across all 10 dimensions?
Wow.
0. Not a single pilot measured as average across all 10 dimensions. And so what Gilbert found was that every pilot had what he called a jagged size profile. meaning they were average in some dimensions, but they weren't average across all 10. And so what was happening was we found that pilots were either, for example, they might be too tall, so they couldn't use the pedals correctly, or they couldn't reach controls effectively. Either they were too close or too far. They were either cramped into the seat, or the seat was too big and they were sliding around. And so these cockpits were completely ineffective. So what happened? What he realized was when you design for the average, you're really designing for nobody. So he went to the Air Force, showed his findings, and they did something pretty radical. They went to the manufacturers and said, we will not accept planes that are designed based on average dimensions. Now you can imagine what manufacturers said. It's going to be too expensive to change. It's going to be too hard to change. We can't possibly do this. And amazingly enough, the Air Force said, we don't care. You are going to design a cockpit that can accommodate the totality of our pilots. You're going to, Tim Rose, who was doing this presentation, you're going to design to the edges. You're going to design for variability. And they refused to accept anything that didn't meet that standard. Well, within months, all of a sudden we started to see adjustable seats that could move back and forth, up and down. We started to see control panels that could be adjusted. We saw panels that could be moved to left or right based on the preference or the design of the pilot. And all of a sudden, you saw that gap in performance disappear. Because instead of designing for the average, they designed for variability. Now, that was 1952 and airplanes. But there's an important lesson. We still design classes, textbooks, assessments. All of the things we do are typically designed with what in mind? The average student. Just like those airplane cockpits were designed for the average pilot, but the average pilot didn't exist. What do we know? Just like those jagged profiles in pilots, we see the exact same thing in our students. Our students come to classes with jagged profiles, meaning they might have exceptional skills in some areas, they might have developmental issues in others, but no two students typically are the same. They don't have, even if they go through the same educational process and the same educational system. Something as simple as, I missed the class on fractions this day, can have a dramatic impact on their conceptual knowledge, their applicative knowledge, their technological knowledge. Yet, we keep designing for nobody. So, none of this is new. We've known this for decades, right? Vygotsky in the 1930s introduced the zone of proximal development, this idea that students and individuals need individual training. They need scaffolding to help them. What they can do with assistance are two totally different things. But those questions, that scaffolding has to be designed for the individual. Malcolm Knowles, andragogy in the 1960s, the idea of the difference between pedagogy, the teaching of children, andragogy is the teaching of adults. A totally new science that says adult learners are different than children. Adult learners come with lived experience that has to be integrated into teaching. We cannot just assume that everything that we're teaching is new. These people have varied experiences with the concepts that we're teaching, and we have to address that prior learning. Carol Dweck, the growth mindset, the idea that individuals need unique feedback, right? That can't be just blank or templated feedback. We need to have it individualized and unique to their performance. My background's in composition, Peter Elbow in the 1980s, and the idea that the writing process is an individual, iterative process, something unique to the individual. All of these things, none of this is new. We've known this for decades. As I've been learning about these things, as I went through my PhD in instructional design, I saw these models and they made sense to me. I knew they should work. The logic and the theoretical foundations made sense. The problem was, and most of us who teach have this experience, I know it should work, I can't make it work at scale. I can do it if I only had one person, but I can't do it when I have 30 students in one section and I'm teaching 5 sections. How can I possibly do this? And so there was this frustration of, I know it should work, but I can't make it happen. So 2009, Kohler and Mishra from Michigan State come up with a model called TPACK. And TPACK looks at the historical training of instructors. And it begins with, for many, many, many centuries, we would hire teachers based primarily on content knowledge, subject matter expertise, right? If you know this stuff, we're going to hire you because you can teach it. It's only been relatively recently that we've started to realize that just because somebody knows something doesn't mean that they can teach it. It's not just about content knowledge, it's also about pedagogical knowledge, the ability, the knowledge of learning systems, learning theory, right? That we can't just hire folks based on content knowledge. We also have to give them pedagogical training. And so that overlap. Now, what makes this interesting is that Mishra and Kohler add a new domain, technological knowledge. The realization, now bear in mind, in 2009 when they write this, the iPad did not yet exist. Now think about this. Think about all of the technology that happened just since this article was presented, but they are saying that it's not just about knowing content and knowing how to teach it. The media, the technology that we teach transforms what's being taught, how it's being taught. And that if we're going to train teachers, there are incredible implications, not just in the knowledge, but in the technology that we use. Now, this model, the TPACK model, is this thing just blew my mind when I first learned about it. But one of the things that I realized about this model was this was centered on who? This entire model was focused on the teacher. What does the teacher need to know? So this is a fantastic model, but it doesn't say anything about students. So the first thing that I started looking at is what kind of reflection, what kind of things do we do when it comes to what we expect our students to know? So I take the TPACK model, content, pedagogy, and technology, and I suggest that there is an equivalent organization that we can look at for students. If the instructor has TPACK, then the student has what I call TACK, content knowledge, applicative knowledge, and technological knowledge. What does the student need to know either before they come into the class or after they're in the class? What do they need to know to be able to be successful? Well, we know that there's content that we have to teach them. There are skills and behaviors that they need, and they need to have an equivalent level of knowledge of technology, especially if we look, for example, at generative AI and the impact that that can have. It's not just about teaching them technology, but understanding the implications, the ethics, right? And all of those kinds of things. These are things that students need to be able to be sorry, I can't use the word, that need to be equally prepared as we need the teacher to be prepared. This gets us back to this idea of the jagged profile. If each one of these circles represents a domain, no two students have domains or circles of equivalent size. And so one of the things that we have to accept as an instructor is that if we have somebody who has a smaller domain, they don't have as much pre-existing knowledge, we can't add to that knowledge until we get them to the minimum of where we need to start. Okay? And this is where we find, so for example, in this illustration, I have a student who has sufficient content knowledge to participate in the class. They have sufficient applicative knowledge to participate in the class, but we see a significantly smaller level of technology knowledge. What might that look like? They didn't have a computer growing up, non-traditional students. Now that's kind of changing, but I remember when I started here in 2002, the number of students who actually had access to a PC was significantly limited. When the internet started to become a prevalent thing, I still had so many students who did not have access at home. I can't tell you how many students I had to tell, go to your public library so you can gain access to this online class. And I didn't really think about what did that do to their learning when they had that limited access or they didn't know how to do things. But I know that until I address this deficiency in technological knowledge, it doesn't matter what I teach in terms of content or application because they're not there yet. I have an obligation as an instructor to see what I can do to address it, right? And if I don't, then I'm not serving that student's need.
With AI, a lot of our students there's a lot of rhetoric out there about AI. So there's a preconceived notion of what it is and what it's about, and they're not even willing to try.
Or they're more than willing to try, but they're willing to try in ways that might seem problematic in terms of my goals or desires for what education or learning looks like. Okay, but we're going to get into that. But this represents this idea of a jagged profile. I have to acknowledge this. Now, getting back to that idea of the jagged profile, how would I deal with a situation where I have 5 different learners and every single one of those learners has a completely different offset, right? Now, some of them, so for example, with number 4, they have no applicative knowledge. They've never done any of this before. They've learned it in a book, but they've never once touched the engine, so to speak. Or number 3, a student who has done this well beyond what everybody else does. They're already advanced, right? And the student of that caliber, all of the assessments, all the activities are going to be things that they already have an ability to do. And if that's the case, am I going to be pushing them? Are they going to be getting anything out of the class? They're going to be coasting, so to speak. Now, that's a group of 5. What do I do with a class of 20? Right? Now, most everybody here that has experience with teaching goes, yeah, this is every day. This is the reality. I can't possibly meet the needs of everybody, so I'm going to try to design for the average. I'm going to try to teach, I apologize, my brain, the distribution, right? I'm not going to try to teach everybody. I'm just going to have to hit that center distribution and just do the best I can, right? This is the classic example of the utilitarian approach to education. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, right? Long live Spock. But getting back to this, we know Theory says these individualized approaches are optimal. The truth of the matter is it's never been a question of what should we do. The question is how. How do we individualize for this without going insane as instructors or using so many resources that it becomes impossible to sustain? So we wish we could be an octopus. We drive ourselves insane trying to come up with ways to individually meet the needs of students. And the truth of the matter is it's not sustainable. Because I have to create unique interventions for each student. And I have to somehow not only deliver, but follow up, acquire feedback, respond to that feedback. We can't do it. But may I suggest that AI gives us that ability to create unique, ongoing, responsive interventions for students. If we design it correctly, we can address those deficiencies that we see in the various domains. Now, one of the first questions that people always bring up when we talk about this kind of thing is, well, then the AI is teaching them. You just worked yourself out of a job. Well, the truth of the matter is, who designs the bot? Who maintains the bot? The bot itself is not going to be able to create anything, but I can program the bot to be able to provide the kinds of activities. So instead of trying to deliver one-on-one training for each student, I can design bots that can assist me in delivering this. So if we go back to this model of TPACK, right? The technological knowledge, applicative knowledge, and content knowledge, what I'm suggesting is that there is a fourth, a multiplicative domain that gets back to what Vygotsky was talking about. The AI scaffolding becomes a multiplier for the TPACK that we're trying to develop. Right? So we talk about, and so we start to design and look at what do these students need? So if I'm looking, for example, at number 5, I see an outsized level of applicative knowledge. What that suggests to me, what kinds of interventions might I design for somebody who already has perhaps an overabundance of skill in a specific area? Well, as I have time, I can start looking at what are additional activities that if somebody especially, for example, my background is in career technical education. I have students that come into the program who have grown up practicing in that particular domain. For example, automotive technology. I can start exploring what are supplemental or additional activities that could be beneficial to somebody who already has a fundamental knowledge. I don't need to repeat that. That's going to cause them to disengage. And we have as much problem with disengagement among higher level students as we do lower level students who don't have the basis. But I can use AI to help design activities that are going to push, strengthen, and engage them in new ways, while I can then focus on other students who need different kinds of interventions. So let's talk a little bit about how scaffolding can work. All right, so this is understanding by design, McTeague and Wiggins. When I started learning about this model, it was called backward design. But the idea of backward design is that we begin with outcomes. What are the desired outcomes for the lesson, for the course, for the program? I should be able to, before I do anything, what is the final version? What should it look like? What if a student completes this activity, what should they be able to do? Can I articulate that clearly? Now, if anybody's been involved in assessment at any level in this university, we hear this all the time, right? That we have to be able to start articulating this. This is the model that we're using, folks. We begin by talking about outcomes. What should the student be able to demonstrate? If I can answer that, then I'm going to go to the second level, which is how am I going to know that that's how they're doing this? I have to be able to assess that in some way. And then, if I'm going to assess it, how do I prepare them for the assessment? Right? So I begin with what should they be able to do? How can I tell if they do it? And then what do I need to provide them to prepare them for the assessments that we're going to do? That's how we should be designing our classes. Now, when we start with outcomes, those outcomes typically will demonstrate or will manifest themselves. What should they know? Content. What should they be able to do? Applicative or application. And what should they use to do it? Technology. So as we're coming up with those outcomes, we should be able to label those based on which domain they fit into. Then, once we have that knowledge, we start to design activities to make sure that they have the fundamental content, the fundamental application, the fundamental technology. That makes sense, right? Now, what we move on to is as we do that, we want to look at two things. What are the prerequisite knowledge? What's the things that they have to know before they even get started? Are there certain terms that they have to know, right? Basic curriculum is you can't take this class. I can't take a class on intermediate statistics if I haven't taken a basic class. So I have to know what knowledge would somebody need to have before we could begin talking about this new thing, right? And are there areas of potential concern? Are there things that I'm worried at that they don't know, or that trends have shown me, the data suggests that even if they've taken this class, most of my students don't understand X concept or Y behavior? What are those? Then, for each one of those, I start to identify direct interventions. What would I do if this student doesn't have this prerequisite knowledge? What would I desire for them? How would I fix that? I might have them look at supplemental material. I might provide a video. One of the problems that I think most of us run into is there's such a wealth of that knowledge out there, it can be overwhelming if I just put it out there. If I just start putting all of that, for example, into a Canvas course, they're going to drown. It's going to be like trying to get a drink out of a fire hydrant. And students are savvy, right? They are not stupid. They will decide, I have a limited amount of discretionary time, and I'm going to make the most of the time that I have. So, as a classic example, I give students a reading. Students know, based on experience, if they come to class and they haven't read, what am I going to do as an instructor? I'm going to review it. I'm going to summarize it for them. Well, if they know coming into my class that that's what's going to happen, what are they going to choose to do? I can skip this reading. Teacher's going to regurgitate it for me. I can do other things, right? So we start designing interventions. Problem is, how do we deliver those in a meaningful way so that the student gets what they need when they need it and that they're actually going to do it? Normally that requires individual connection. I have to present it at the time that it's needed. And this gets us back to that question of scalability. This is where AI comes in. If the student is interacting with an AI, the AI can provide that training when it's needed. It can be triggered so that it recognizes when the student needs the intervention if I've told the AI what the intervention is. And it can wait. It can decide, is this the right time? Does this student need this or not? So, in the design of classes that I've been teaching for the last 2 semesters, this is typically how I design it. I'll begin with student-facing content. So for example, an assignment description, which we always give, and learning outcomes. Now, in AI, a recent development in the technology of AI is something called RAG, or Retention Augmented Generation. Does anybody know what that means? Okay. Kirk, what you got? Well, but the idea of retention augmented generation is the idea that AI can refer to external content that is permanent. So what we normally call this in AI is memory. The idea that I can have an interaction with an AI and then I can come back in a separate conversation and it will recall or remember what I talked about previously. This was a transformative experience in AI because it used to be I would talk to an AI in this conversation and would remember everything that we were talking about at the time. But if I came back, it would forget everything I had said before. And so I would have to remind it. But the growth of RAG allows us to create an ongoing kind of meta consciousness. This idea that there are certain ideas that it can recall over time. So what I can do is create something, an AI bot that has access and that can recall certain information on an ongoing basis. So for example, if I give the student an assignment description and learning outcomes, if I give the AI that same assignment description and those same learning outcomes, all the interactions that I have with that AI will be informed because we're talking about a common piece of knowledge. Now, I can additionally add in to that description those intervention options that I was talking about. If the student is struggling with X, have them watch this YouTube video. What makes that useful is if the student's not struggling with X, the YouTube video isn't suggested. So the student doesn't feel like I have to watch this thing that is absolutely mind-numbing because I already know this. And the student who does need it doesn't feel like I'm being called out because they recognize that they need that information. And the student who needs that supplemental or increased or expanded activity, I already know all of this stuff, I can create interventions that would be prompted. And all of this will exist before the class begins so that it becomes a seamless experience for the student. Additionally, I can include additional behaviors, explanations of what the AI should do in these interactions. What do I expect it to do? What should it do? What should it not do? I can design that to give the guidance to the AI about what it does when it interacts with a student. Just like if I was a professor working with TAs, I would give them instruction about how I want them to deal with students that they interact with. I'm still responsible for the course, but I now have an extra set of hands that can make classes more unique, more scalable, more individualized. Yes?
So, in relation to RAG in relation to RAG and your intervention, this sounds like a notebook LM would do both those things.
It could.
Because for RAG, to get RAG to happen in Notebook LM is as simple as bringing in, or the professor providing these links, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the intervention or the personalization, you just basically, Clive this is Clive, the teacher, right? In the, how you want the chat to respond,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mhm.
So it kind of sounds like it could happen there.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. And that's exactly how it's working. Okay. I can design this so that each individual assignment has a unique experience, right? So I can design it so that I'm not using a general AI. I can have it uniquely tailored to the specifics of the context in which we're doing it. So I don't have to worry about the AI going, I have no idea what we're talking about. Before they even begin the conversation, I have designed a bot that has the specifics of the assignment. And like you said, I can constrict it so that the AI only focuses on that assignment, is only aware of the readings that the student has read so that we're not bringing in extraneous or irrelevant information, right? I can design it so that it is uniquely tailored to that specific instance. And then it allows me to more specifically be able to focus on what are traditional developmental issues. What does a student normally not understand, or where do I know that students come in with missing specific areas? Classic example, now I don't teach math, but I know many people struggle with fractions, right? So I could design an incredible number of different interventions that could help students to figure out what is the obstacle or challenge or blockage with fractions that I could build in so that those students could get the assistance they need without making everybody else wait for them to get through that development, right? But this way, I'm not just teaching to that center, I'm teaching to the edges. So, I know that nobody can read this. This is an English 1101 course that I teach, 1101, 1101P. Now, it's a fully online asynchronous course. Now, 1101P is a studio program designed to assist students who are developmental in nature who need to be able to pass an English course. So they're integrated into a traditional English class. Okay? Now, like I said, I teach in the College of Technology. So the majority of my students are career technical students, meaning most of them will never write a traditional academic style essay in their lives after that course. So one of the things that I've decided to do is I wanted to make my class more authentic, more realistic for them. So one of the things that I've chosen to do is an assignment called Project Zero, where I asked them to identify writing unique to their career field. So if they're a diesel technician, I'm going to ask them to go and explore diesel technology and look for writing examples that fit that kind of thing. So for example, parts orders, insurance claims, shop journals. Now, I also have students that are in occupational therapy assistant or physical therapy assistants. They're going to write SOAP notes. So I can allow students to explore all kinds of different writing and still manifest the same outcome. But how could I possibly manage that and the distinct nature of a parts order versus a SOAP note versus et cetera, so on and so forth, and maintain my sanity as an instructor? How do I teach them the unique elements of all of those things? I can't do that if I'm trying to do that myself. But if I design my AI bot, that bot can interact with that specific student and help them to explore in their own way, in their own terminology, what they need to do. I can still assess the overall quality of writing. I can assess what they're doing, but I don't have to try to do it all myself. So as you're looking at this screen, for example, I identified common issues that I experience. So for example, under content, what are some problems that I typically run into? I've got a student who's just come into the program. They don't know anything about the program yet. So they're unfamiliar with the chosen discipline. I want to go into this, but I haven't done anything in it yet. I'm in the first semester. Or the ability to identify writing samples. The ability to craft coherent responses. I have some students who haven't chosen yet. They're taking their gen eds first. They don't even know where they're going yet. So how can I pick what writing to do? These are all common problems that might prevent a student from being able to complete that assignment, right? So I've done the same thing with applications, same thing with technology. What are common problems? So for example, one of the things that they're expected to do is do a web search or a web quest. I want you to go out onto the internet and find examples of writing in your field. Now, if I was to ask students to go and do something like that, guarantee if they don't know how to do a web quest, they're going to write, what are common writing activities in diesel technology? They're going to Google that, and what are they going to do? They're going to pick the very first response, regardless of its quality, and that's their answer, right? Because they don't have the skills to be able to understand that. Now imagine if I have something where when they do that, I have an AI that can say, that's a great response. But let's maybe look a little bit more. What's the quality of this source that you just found? What are some other responses? How did you decide that that was a good? Imagine if I could, because if I had a student that came into my office, those are the kinds of questions I would ask. If I could ever get students to come to my office, right? But imagine if I have something that's available to be able to ask those kinds of questions, those kinds of probing questions that expand on what they already are willing to do. And as I like to talk about, I know that the majority of my students do their homework, for example, between 10 o'clock and midnight. I'm not going to be up to answer those questions. There's no way. But imagine if I have somebody who is eager and awake and aware at 10 p.m. who is willing to ask them that question and follow up. And doesn't just sound like a canned response or a worksheet, but something that is unique and in the moment addressing that student. Once I have all of these ideas, so for example, if I have a student who's unfamiliar with the chosen discipline, I can ask the AI to act in a Socratic manner. Socratic being what? Asking questions, not answering questions, but simply asking additional ones that drive the student to explore further. If they don't know how to do a web quest, I can give them guided questions to analyze the results that they get. Right? So as I gain experience with this assignment, I can see what typically trips up students, and I can design better interventions moving forward that can help improve their experience and improve their overall performance. And then I build those interventions into the profile for the AI that the student will interact with. It can essentially diagnose and respond to what it sees in the student, just like I would, but in a more scalable way. Because every single student that comes to that bot, it can respond to the unique needs of that, just like I would. So, this is all well and good, right? Sounds fantastic, but first question, how much time does this take? It's a great question. One of the things that I'm most excited about with the development of AI up to this point is its emphasis on something called natural language processing. Does anybody know what natural language processing is? I can simply speak to it. I don't have to be a programmer. I don't have to know Python to be able to speak to an AI. So when we ask the question, how long does it take? I can simply tell it what I'm trying to do. I can say, I'm trying to design a bot to help assist my students. And it will understand what I'm talking about. It can help me design itself. So when the question is of how much time does it take, I would say the first time that I did a bot profile, it probably took me longer than I want to admit. Probably took me about a week because I was trying to understand how it all worked. But when I started to realize the nature of natural learning, I realized I didn't have to try to be coy. I could be very explicit about what I wanted. And the more you learn how to do this, the less time it takes. So this is not something that's going to take an entire semester to do. We're talking you can do these profiles in 30, 40 minutes.
Showing admins, associate dean, students, notebook LM in five to 10 minutes.
Yes.
And people are blown away and on their way.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't take, and one of the most amazing things about AI is it will learn how you learn. And it will be, and once I've designed one, again, that RAG, that retention augmented generation, once I've done it once, I can say, I need to do this same thing again, but here's the new assignment. And it will remember all of the discussion that came into.
Notebook LM saves your entire chat.
Saves the entire chat. Most AIs will do that. Different quality of experience, very much true. But the idea is that memory over chats significantly improves over time. Okay? I've never used AI like that before. It's designed to respond to what you need. Okay? So even if you haven't done it before, it's not something where you can break it, number one. Okay? And you can learn and interact with it over time. This is a big deal. I don't have access to frontier level AI models. I don't have access to the premium ones, and I don't want to pay X number of dollars. The university has said that it cannot pay for subscriptions to. Okay, couple of things. Most LLMs, for example, Claude, ChatGPT, have Gemini. Well, we'll get to Gemini in a second. But a lot of these have free models that you can use that will still allow you to do this in a meaningful way. The university does have access through Google Workspace. We have access to Gemini and Gemini Pro. Okay, so we do have access to a frontier level AI. Okay, is it the greatest? I personally prefer Claude. Okay. And that's okay. Is built into it.
Every human on the planet has access.
Okay. So, but the idea is there are workarounds for this. And I do believe that in time, it's going to become a necessity that we are going to find ourselves having to acquire access to these types of things just because of the nature of the technology. Just like it used to be, it was not easy to get access to a PC. It now is a ubiquitous requirement. This is a big question. The more I do this, doesn't this pull me out of the classroom and it just replaces me with an AI? Okay, we'll see you later, Kurt. Thank you for coming. Okay. The thing is what you are going to be, what you can do with this is the design of the bot, the interventions, those kinds of things, That is what makes us unique as humans and instructors in the first place. The fact that we might not be delivering it doesn't minimize the fact that we have to know that material and that it exists, and to be able to even understand what the nature of the discipline, so that we can understand where the deficiencies exist. That already is something that we bring that's unique to us as the instructor. Okay, what this allows us to do is to be able to focus on the things that make us unique in the first place. It allows us to improve and expand and enhance what we already do. And this gets to that second question: isn't this just teaching by robot? Okay, this does not, one of the biggest things that I would say is you can't do this without having your fingerprints everywhere. And what it allows you to do is to get deeper into what students are actually doing, because I have more evidence. The more, for example, I'm participating in a pilot for the state with a system called Boodlebox. One of the things that Boodlebox allows me to do is to have collaborative interactions with AI, which means more than one person can talk to the same AI at the same time. I can share conversations. So what that means is that as my student is talking to the AI, I am able to get in and participate in that conversation with them at the same time. But what this means is that conversation is being recorded, it's being captured. And all of a sudden, that conversation now has persistence. It becomes an artifact. And I get to see more of that conversation than I would in a class where a student might only say one or two things during the course of a class. I now have an entire conversation between that student directly talking with, and I know this anthropomorphizes everything, but I have a conversation with the student in the AI that I can see. And it exposes more of what that student has learned than I would normally get in any other way. It does beg the question, privacy? Now, biggest problem with privacy is this question of that LLMs typically ask that they can use information to train their models. And this gets back to what Kirk was saying a minute ago. Our access to Gemini, by contract, Gemini says that its materials cannot be used for training, which means those interactions don't get folded back into the large language model, which protects student privacy. Okay, that isn't always the case with other models, but I have a feeling that as we expand and explore this, that becomes more and more accessible. And this gets us to the last one. Aren't they just going to cheat if you use AI? And honestly, folks, that is the million-dollar question. I honestly don't have an answer to that just yet. But I have a lot more transparency if I have students interacting with AI where I'm hearing and seeing those responses than if I just simply focus on a product-based assessment where all I'm getting from them is the final version. If I have conversations, I can see some evolution of thinking. Now, is it possible for that to be offloaded onto an AI, especially with agents like Einstein? Yes. Don't have an answer for that just yet. But it's a lot clearer than where we're at right now. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to skip this last page and just go straight to, I've been talking for quite a bit. We've got about 5 minutes left. Are there questions, thoughts? And please not everybody at once.
So Clayn, I have a question on Zoom.
Okay.
So yeah, so thanks for the presentation. I took good notes. So I think you answered some of my questions there in that last 5 minutes, but so I teach in political science, and I mainly teach public administration program students. And it is interesting because we have a lot of the same issues that everyone has. People have different content knowledge, different ability to apply things. And so I was wondering, where would you suggest I start? Is it finding an AI tool? And I wrote some names down here. Like, where was someone, and I use Notebook LM in my courses based on a presentation that ISU gave maybe a year ago. So I am trying to get ahead of the curve and trying to use AI as a tool. But where do I start to kind of implement Stack?
Well, the truth of the matter is, I think that what you just described is where you start. You start where you're at. There isn't a right tool to use. There isn't a specific thing. It's the incredible thing about AI is that you can interact with it directly. So you can simply say, look, this is what I want to do. You can do that with Notebook LM. Notebook LM is really, really helpful in creating those bots, but it's somewhat restricted in that it can only talk about what you give it. So I would probably say something a little bit more open. For example, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini would be a great way to say, look, one of the most unique experiences I had, and I did this last summer, was to just have brainstorming sessions with AI and just start to ask it questions about, this is what I want to do. How would I start? You can actually ask it that question and it will engage, and you can respond to it and just have that back and forth. That's where I'd start, to be honest with you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
It feels really weird the first time you do it, I promise, but it is really, really interesting as you get going. And I will say that some of my colleagues are incredibly grateful because I'm not pounding on their door saying, how do I do this? And that's both good and bad. I tend to sometimes go down rabbit holes, as some of my colleagues might agree with. Anyway. Laura, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. So I've been thinking about several ways I could implement this in my course where I teach Introduction to Information Research. And then I'm coming out with a new course in the fall, LLIB 1125, which is just the health sciences component of that. And so I'm struggling with students, like how to use AI and not how to use AI in the course. And also, yes, providing those in like individual interventions, like you're saying, especially where I might have dual enrolled students. I'm finding that I need to do sometimes a 504 accommodation, and so this bends my syllabus all over the place. So what I'm just wondering, so can I have an example of, would I build an AI bot per assignment? So let's just say in Unit 7, we're building PICO research questions. And and in fact, per unit, I have a huge document of, here's my canned responses. I have for these typical questions that I've been saving, over the past few years, because I feel like I myself am a robot, copy paste the different answers back into their research notebook that they're keeping in a Google Doc all semester. So sorry, I'm taking forever, but would you recommend building a chatbot per assignment?
I would, because what you can do is that you can, like I was saying, and it gets to what you were just talking about. You'll have this huge list of those frequently asked questions that you answer for each assignment. The more I can build a bot that is uniquely prepared for the questions in this assignment, decreases the likelihood of that AI getting overwhelmed. If I create a bot that tries to cover the entire class, the document that would contain all that information would be immense. And and one of the things that AI struggle with is trying to process large amounts of information and retaining that information and responding accurately. So the more granular I can make the bot, the smaller the scope, the better the bot does in terms of recalling and giving correct information. So definitely I would go one bot per assignment.
How are you linking that into your Canvas course? Can you
Okay.
think it's right there?
So what I typically did, what I did last semester was I would create the bot profile as a document that I would ask the student to download and upload into the AI, and then they would go from there. One of the things that Boodlebox does and that the state is looking at recommending is it allows me to create the bot and it operates without the student having to do anything. They just log into the system please don't take this is not a sales pitch. But what it allows me to do is to create the bot myself, and the student just simply logs in and interacts with it. So they don't have to see, for example, how the sausage gets made. They don't see the huge profile. They just simply log in and the assignment is there. And it just logs in straight from Canvas. So that's the way I'm working right now, and it is absolutely fantastic. But we're going to wait on that to see. The one thing about it for me that's so exciting, if you've ever paid for a subscription, the average price per month for just about any premium bot is about $20. Boodlebox allows you access to every premium model for $8 a month. It is crazy. And don't ask me how they are able to do it. That's just the model that they use. But you are able to have free access. You have access to the premium versions of ChatGPT, Claude, Mistral, Perplexity, all of it. And it's all housed in one place. We have an authorization from ISU to be able to use it, and students can purchase a semester-long subscription, like I said, for $8 a month, one time, and they can use it for every class that they take. And that's what the big part is, Laura, like you were just saying, how do I deliver that bot to a student? That's how I've been using it. Okay, so we're a little bit over time, but are there any other questions before we call it good? So like I said, the handout is contained in the chat that kind of explains the concept of Stack and some of the models. I've got a white paper on Stack that's linked at the very end of that, the brief overview. And my contact information is on that as well, so that if anybody would like to have, how do I do this, or I'd like to try to do some of this, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. And I promise to do my best not to get too geeky when I do that. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I'm so grateful for your time and for your attention. Please share. Oh, can we reshare it? Okay, yeah. So Michelle will resend that. And I believe that we can also upload that to the how do you pronounce it? Are you just going Clay or? Clay. Okay. We'll add that to the webpage as a resource because this has been recorded, so we'll have access to that. So other than that, thank you everybody for your time, and there we go.